For those who may not know me, my name is Colin Carmichael. I'm the Executive Director of the Huron Chamber of Commerce, and so I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here this morning. I know it's been a bit of a wild ride with the weather we had in February, interrupting the original plan for this event, but the silver lining is that with the rescheduling, we were able to have Daniel Tisch from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce be here in person to talk about the Ontario Economic Report, and so that's great. So while this this event is called the Huron Economic Outlook, it could just as easily be called the Huron Economic Lookout. Thanks for laughing at that bad joke. I stole that joke from John McKenzie, who's the CEO of TMX Group, so it's his fault, though I'm pretty sure he stole it as well. So the way this is going to work this morning, I will stop talking soon, and I'll invite my board chair to come up and introduce Dan, who will then speak, and then our local panel will come up and The idea behind this event was to take that provincial look at the economy and localize it and find those relevancies for Huron County. So we have our local panel of business leaders who will help us do that from their particular sectors, and whether that's their own specific businesses or broader than that. And then I will invite the room to participate as well. I'll call it a Q&A, but really if you have insights as well as questions, I'd invite you to share them as well. And so I'm kind of looking forward to all of the insights. I want to thank the sponsors of today's event, Community Futures Huron, and Tamara's over there from Community Futures. They are always a willing partner for the Chamber and others to support these kinds of events that just help drive the economy in Huron County. Royal LePage Heartland Realty just recently have come on as cornerstone sponsors of the Chamber. They've been longtime members and supporters of the Chamber, and they contributed to this morning's event as well. And then it wouldn't be a breakfast event without caffeine, and so we're thankful to Coastal Coffee in ACW for providing the caffeine in liquid form for us this morning to get us through the next hour or so. And then the food from the Blythe Inn, just up the road there. And so thanks to Ange and her team for providing the food this morning. Where they hiding? But before I ask Jody to come up, I want to just provide a little bit of context around the Huron Chamber of Commerce. Many of you in the room are members, some are not, some of the members may not be aware of some of the growth that the Chamber has experienced recently. So we, late last year, expanded from the three municipalities that we've served for the last 15 or so years to now represent 8 of the 9 municipalities in Huron County. That 9th municipality is South Huron, and we have folks from South Huron in the room today. And the only reason they're excluded is because they, of course, have the South Huron Chamber of Commerce who serves them well. And of course, there are a few other chambers in the county, most notably Bayfield and Area Chamber of Commerce. And so we've been able to develop a really good working relationship with Bayfield and South Huron. And the recent culmination of that collaboration was the formation of the Huron Economic Response Task Force that we set up about a month ago in response to some of the things we will talk about today, I'm sure. And so the 3 chambers came together and created this task force with the idea that we would be able to bring together all of those organizations that support the business community in Huron County, pool our resources, share information, have a centralized space to host that information, so that our business owners and managers can have one central place to find it. Doesn't mean that we're not all still doing all of the work we were going to do anyway in our individual organizations, but it's really just to collect those resources. So we now have, I've kind of lost count, it's well over a dozen now organizations from across the county, including most of our municipalities, Community Futures Huron again, United Way is involved, the task force, and I'm now going to forget the other ones that I wanted to mention. But anyway, Canadian Federation of Independent Business, Ontario Federation of Agriculture, Huron County Federation of Agriculture, and the list goes on. I would be remiss if I didn't give a little shout out to Akira Studios in Bayfield. They've been our website provider at the Chamber for many years, and they donated the website for the task force and the work that went into getting it up and running in less than 24 hours. And they got that spun up, and we were able to start flowing resources to it very, very quickly once the decision was made to move ahead. So my thanks to Tony Scott and his team. So the task force has a weekly check-in meeting every Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. I don't know whose idea that was. It was mine, but it seemed like the best time to not interfere with all of the things that our folks have scheduled throughout the week. So every Monday morning, we meet on Zoom. Anyone is welcome to join those calls. We've, I think on every single one so far, we've had at least one business owner join and to share how they're being impacted already, even kind of pre-tariff and the uncertainty of things. Again, things we'll talk about later today. So I encourage you to visit huronertf.ca and perhaps check in with us on Monday morning. If there are resources that you're aware of that aren't on our resource page, please let me know, and I'm happy to put them up there. We have local resources, provincial resources, and national resources. So we have things up there from Export Development Canada, Business Development Bank of Canada, Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, all kinds of organizations. And then we have resources from Huron County Economic Development and from some of our BIAs, and then some of our members. We have a mental health resource up there from the Clarity Group in Goderich, and we have a human resources resource for that was provided to us specifically for the task force from Ladder HR Solutions, who've just recently joined the chamber and offered some advice around human resources preparations for what might be coming down the line. So with that, I will, as I promised, I'll stop talking, and I will turn things over to the chair of the board of the Huron Chamber of Commerce, Jody Snell.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to be here with you for the first ever Huron Economic Outlook. This new event was created to connect the insights from the Ontario Economic Report to the realities, opportunities, and the challenges we face here in Huron County. Released in February by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, the Ontario Economic Report is the foundation for today's discussion. It provides a data-driven look at business confidence, regional economic trends, and the policy environment shaping Ontario's economy in 2025. To help us explore this big picture perspective, we're fortunate to be joined this morning by someone who understands both the numbers and the people behind them. Daniel Tisch is the president and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, a role that he stepped into in 2023. In that time, he has become a leading advocate for Ontario's business community, guiding the OCC's work on policy, research, and economic development. Dan brings to this role decades of experience as a communication leader. He has served for many years as the CEO of Argyle, one of Canada's most respected public affairs firm. He has advised governments, corporations, and nonprofits across Canada and around the world. And he has served as the chair of the Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communication Management. This morning, Dan will share key insights from the 2025 Ontario Economic Report, provide an update on Ontario's response to the ongoing trade disputes with the U.S., and speak to how the Chamber Network is working to support business success across the province, excuse me, and right here in Huron County. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, Daniel Tisch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jody, and thank you also to Colin for the invitation to speak today. And actually, let me thank you both, not just for the invitation, but for the incredible leadership that you've shown. I think the growth of this chamber has been something quite spectacular, and a real tribute, I think, to the resilience of the business community and the determination to support one another in good times and bad times, right? And we all know that this is a time, we hope it won't be a bad time, but there's no question it'll be very, very rocky and very bumpy. And it is a time when the support that we give one another as business people is so incredibly valuable. So thank you both. And the amazing thing for me in this role is getting to visit communities and chambers across Ontario, because we have quite an extraordinary network. We have 150 chambers in Ontario. So far, I've gotten to, this is my, I have a little count on my phone, you know, and where I list the places I've had the privilege of visiting. This is number 46. So I'm getting there in 15 months on the job so far. But it's kind of extraordinary, because I've really been impressed at every single stop by the role that our chambers of commerce and boards of trade, from the biggest cities to the smallest towns, the role that they play in convening, in mobilizing, and empowering local business across the province, which is so incredibly valuable. And right now, in this week, when we're faced with probably the greatest uncertainty that we've had, well, since COVID anyway, right? But among the greatest moments of uncertainty that we've had in our lifetimes, it's particularly important, this work we do together. It's particularly urgent, and I think right now it has the opportunity, by influencing public policy and working with government at all levels, to be particularly impactful. And so let's talk about where we are today. And I don't mean as business, I don't mean, like in this community hall or even in this county. I mean as business people working together and trying to, do our thing and support our workers and our communities and our customers. Let's talk about where we are as Canadian and global citizens in a world that all of a sudden seems way more unstable than at any time since the Cold War, less able to agree on our problems and less capable of working together to solve those problems. So think about the last 3 months. Going into the year, our team certainly knew and expected that we would definitely have a federal election. We would likely have a provincial election, and there'd be some sort of madness emanating from the White House, right? Now, little did we know that all of this would happen in the course of the winter, right? In the course of the first 3 months of the year. So, obviously I want to talk about the elephant in the room, the great big orange elephant in the room, virtually anyway. So the new U.S. president is sworn in late January. He begins his term in office, not targeting China, not targeting Russia, or any one of America's great rivals in the world. He starts off his term by attacking Canada, America's greatest friend, ally, and partner for more than a century. And so we all know, of course, about the tariff threat. We also know about, the tariffs, the threats, the insults, right? It seems to change. The rationale for all this seems to change every day. So initially, it was about fentanyl and migrants, right? And border security, right? And of course, Canada, we all say, a lot of people, myself included, said, well, we should look after our border. We should invest more in that. We should ensure that the borders are more secure. Canadian government says, sure, they spend or commit $1.3 billion. They send people down to Washington. They show the progress. They show how little fentanyl actually crosses, from north to south, and how much crosses the other way, right? And they think, okay, they get good feedback from the Americans, but that's not enough. That's not enough. And why is it not enough, according to the administration? Because they can't issue tariffs unless they can claim credibly that, or incredibly, that there's a national emergency. They don't have the authority to do that. And so they've got to continue to say, oh, there's an emergency here. We're acting to solve this emergency. Sometimes it's about Canada becoming the 51st state, an ambition that no doubt the president has, since he repeats it again and again and again. He stopped doing it last week with his first call with the new prime minister, which is progress, but I'm sure it's not out of his head. And, you know, it has embarrassed Americans, at least every American I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot in the last few months, and it's unified Canadians like never before, right? Sometimes, and he repeated this week, sometimes it's about the U.S. subsidizing Canada. And so the first time he said this, we all sort of, you know, started to Google and look at our calculators and, you know, where does he get this claim that, you know, $200 billion subsidy against Canada? Well, it turns out he's talking about the trade deficit. And if you look at this week's announcement, which I'll speak more about in a moment, but this week's announcement, all of that card that he held up, you know, with all the countries, right? And he said, they're targeting us, we're targeting them. Well, all they're doing is looking at the trade deficits that America has with each country, dividing it up and applying a tariff to try to solve the trade deficit, because he believes a trade deficit is a subsidy, rather than quite simply America producing less than it consumes, right? So it's kind of like me going down to the local Tim Hortons, ordering too many donuts. You know, I order 20 donuts and I go outside and I do a news conference and I say, we've been subsidizing the donut shop for too long, you know. Mr. Tim Horton's been treating us very badly, right? That's kind of what it's like, isn't it, right? And so sometimes, and this is probably the only one that serious people give any credibility to, it's about bringing manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. But this is an economic strategy that's out of 1925, not 2025. Because if you think about the sources of the high standard of living that Americans and Canadians enjoy today, it comes from the fact that our products that we buy, they're sourced, their components and the labor to build these products, they're sourced from countries all over the world, right? They combine different ingredients and different skills and know-how in order to build the best possible products at the best possible price. We don't live in a world anymore of national economies. We live in a world of global ecosystems. Now, of course, we can say, well, no, we want to go back to 1925, right, and build high tariff walls that protect our industries. But that's a very different economic model, and we cannot expect the same standard of living. And I don't think Americans are up for that. And I don't think that will be good for the world economy, right? Because what happens when you have high tariffs? Well, businesses become less competitive because they're protected by these tariffs. Business costs go up, consumer costs go up, market access for businesses goes down, and of course you get inflation, you get less productivity, you get less innovation, and in the end your standard of living is lower. Not to mention the risk of global conflict, which is exactly what's happening right now. And anyway, even if for a moment you suspend disbelief rather, and you say, okay, well, what if this could be successful? What if this could actually bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S.? Even if investors were interested in doing this, spending billions of dollars to close the plant in Windsor and move it, to Michigan, right? Which costs an insane amount of money, right? And would take years. And in those years, there'd be layoffs, there'd be shortages, there'd be sky-high prices for automobiles. What a gift to the Chinese vehicle manufacturing industry. But let's say, suspend disbelief and say, let's do it. Why would anybody invest in the U.S. when its policies seem to change every single day? It's not a good investment proposition. So we're in a period where, there's a climate of uncertainty and instability, and it is driving, unfortunately, jobs and investment out of North America. Just look at what the stock market did this week as the president moved from a regional trade conflict to a global trade war. And the horrible thing about it is that it's a war that nobody can win, because a trade war doesn't have winners, it only has losers. Am I bringing you down? I'm sorry, I don't mean to bring you down after such a tasty breakfast. Well, there will be some optimism, I promise, right? But the global economy is not a reality TV show. And businesses and investors, we want thoughtfulness, not theatrics. We want certainty, we don't want psychodrama. And, we don't want Liberation Day, because Liberation Day just means relieving people of their hard-earned cash, liberating people from their cash. So you got to wonder, what can we do about all this? So one thing, I'll talk a little bit about some things we've been trying to do, and also we'll get to the state of Ontario's economy right now. So in the last 2 months, I've been to Washington a couple of times, once with the provincial premiers, including Premier Ford, obviously, and once to meet with business leaders. And so I've met with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, I've met with the U.S. Business Roundtable, which is big companies in the U.S., I've spoken to a member of the President's Cabinet. I've spoken to a Republican senator. I've called, had Zoom calls with the CEOs of all of the 8 state chambers that border Ontario, as well as a couple more for good measure across the border in Western Canada. And it's interesting because most of these conversations, it feels like I'm on a reverse apology tour, right? The conversation usually goes something like this. When I meet somebody, they'll say, "Where are y'all from?" I'll say, "Oh, I'm from Canada." And they say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," right? That's usually what I get, right? It's like them saying sorry. We're known for saying sorry, but they're the ones saying sorry, right? Now some are very cautious. They try to explain the inexplicable. They try to excuse the inexcusable. And so they'll say things like, "Well, you know that the 51st state stuff, this is actually a compliment," right? Or they'll say, "Well, certainly the president has his own unique negotiating style, he just wants a deal, he's a good negotiator." They say, "We agree that we need to get stability back. We need to get predictability. We need to get certainty. And at some point, let's get to the table and work out our differences." And of course, me, and perhaps all of you, are sitting there thinking, well, we didn't really have many differences. You decided that we had differences. We have a trade deal that this president signed 5 years ago and has just decided, well, I don't like that deal anymore. It went from being, the greatest deal in history to, who signed this deal, right? Like, it's unbelievable, right? Now, this week, though, you started to see some cracks, right? Because I think a lot of lawmakers in Washington, in Congress, are now starting to understand the sheer scale of this insanity and the instability, and let's just think about it for a second from the standpoint of American businesses, workers, and communities, and the level of anxiety they feel, just as we're all feeling it too, right? And so you actually saw the Republicans, join the Democrats. 4 Republicans joined the Democrats this week to pass a resolution in the U.S. Senate opposing the tariffs against Canada. You've seen the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, obviously one of our partners that we've been speaking to, come out very publicly and forcefully saying that tariffs are a terrible idea, right? Direct quote from the CEO, "Tariffs are a tax on Americans, a tax paid by Americans at the worst possible time," right? So they're starting to say in public what they've long been saying to us in private. And so if you think about where we go next with this, I'm cautiously optimistic, despite all of this, that at some point after the federal election, we'll be able to sit down as a country with the United States and we'll hammer out some sort of deal. What it'll look like, how long it'll take, that is really, really hard to predict. But the challenge and the problem is that in many ways the damage has already been done. It was interesting last night, Colin and I went to Cowbell, for dinner, right? And they said, they were saying there are a few things not on the menu. The American wine, we're not serving it, right? And we're like, yeah, we know. But if you think about that, the reputation of U.S. products and services in Canada, I won't say it's irreparable, but it will take years to repair the damage. And I don't know about you, but I'm not likely to trust anything that this administration signs, right, even if we do get to a deal. So because they've proven to be an unreliable and unpredictable trade partner, and there's no guarantees they'll respect the deal they signed this time, we've actually got to take charge of our own destiny, right? And so our mantra, mine and I hope yours too, is let's control what we can and let's try to influence the rest. So we need to double down on our strengths, and we need to reinforce our resilience and take decisive steps to secure our own future. So let me talk a little bit about the Ontario Economic Outlook and the Ontario Economic Report, which we released in February. So one thing we look at in the report is there are 3 chapters to the report. I think Colin has a copy here, and I think he circulated it. But if you need a link to it, we can easily provide that to you from our site. But there are 3 chapters. The first is a business confidence survey. The second is economic data from the Bank of Montreal, our partner. And the third chapter is recommendations from the Ontario Chamber, what we think needs to happen next. We look at business confidence because it's important. It's our way of tapping in to the experiences and the perspectives of people like you all across the province. You know, these 60,000 businesses that are part of our chamber. We try to get a sample that's representative and balanced from across the province. And that's because business confidence drives investment decisions and it drives employment decisions. That's why we do the survey. So, you know, what we saw was a really mixed bag this year. We did the survey, we looked at the results in December, right? And in December, we saw that business confidence in Ontario was at 26%. Now you may say that's not very good, but for perspective, a year earlier it was 13%. Now a little lower here in the Stratford Bruce zone, which is the region that the regional breakdown that we used. It was 19% this year, up a fair bit from a year ago, right? So not great by historical standards, but better than a year ago, right? Why? Lower interest rates, higher consumer spending, lower inflation, right? So businesses felt more confident. But we released this in February, and you know, a couple of weeks before, I said to our team, an awful lot has happened that might affect business confidence. Let's do the survey again. So we did the survey the first week of February. You remember the day after Groundhog Day, you had Trump and Trudeau had that phone call, which resulted in the first 30-day delay. But you know, great, we got a reprieve from the tariffs for 30 days, but ongoing instability, ongoing uncertainty, which is bad for business. So we asked that very week, you know, what's your confidence in the economy? Remember I said 26% in December? It dropped to 15%, 15%, you know, by the first week of February. And we asked businesses, okay, well, so how will your business be affected by tariffs? Or will it be affected? 67% said, my business will be negatively affected by tariffs. We said, can you adapt to the tariffs? 48%, this is not bad news, 48% said, yeah, we can adapt. But here's the challenge. How are they adapting? Number 1 answer, raise prices. Number 2 answer, diversify suppliers away from the US. Number 3 answer, reduce my workforce. 2 of those things are not good. So the question then, and the other thing I'll say is, you know, more lately, in addition to the statistical answers, I've been collecting kind of anecdotal feedback, right? I did a session with Parry Sound yesterday. I was in Peterborough last week. Looking forward to learning from all of you today. But anecdotally, what I hear is businesses are saving. They're stockpiling as much as they can right now, you know, before all these tariffs kick in. They're scenario planning. I hear business leaders saying they're anxious. They're worried about having to lay off their valued staff, right? And seeing that as a last resort. They're losing sleep. They're worried about crossing the border. And one quote I heard in Peterborough last week, which stuck with me, is the guy said, he's a manufacturer, he said, I don't know what I'm asking, and I don't know whom to ask. So they need help. They really need help. So I guess the question is how we become more productive, how we become more resilient. And that's really at the core of our advocacy as the Ontario Chamber. So the first day of the Ontario election, we released an Ontario election platform of our own called Ontario Competes, with the argument that competitiveness has to be our number 1 priority, right, as a business community. In the federal election, we issued one the first day of the campaign called Ontario's Prosperity, Canada's Progress. And the recommendations we made to the province and the federal government are obviously different because they're different jurisdictions, but the 4 pillars are exactly the same. And our argument is there are 4 things that we need to think about in order to be more competitive, right? First, obviously, a competitive business and trade environment. So that's stuff like taxes and regulations and the cost of doing business, the speed of permitting, all the things that are needed to reduce the barriers and the risk for business people in building their businesses and contributing to the economy. Second, a skilled and diverse workforce to ensure that we have the people and the talent to be able to run these businesses and make them successful. Third, healthy and sustainable communities, which obviously involves healthy and sustainable municipalities. And finally, investing in growth-enabling infrastructure, right? So that's stuff like rail infrastructure, that's stuff like ports, that's stuff like transportation hubs, right? These are the building blocks, in our view, of Ontario's competitiveness. So in terms of our action plan, first thing that we think we have to do is there's got to be some triage done to understand, now that we have a sense of what these tariffs look like, what industries are most at risk. Not just what industries, but what sectors, what businesses, what communities are most at risk. Our view is this can't be like COVID-style cash sprinkled all over the country, right? This has to be very, very targeted in order to be effective, because there's going to be a lot of money involved in protecting business at a time like this. And one thing we're very focused on, I should say, is smaller manufacturers. There are many things we need to focus on, but I think about smaller manufacturers because they're very much at risk right now. And it's because once a manufacturing footprint leaves, a city, town, community, it's not likely to come back, right? It's like that Bruce Springsteen song, right? Foreman says these jobs are going, boys, and they ain't coming back. It's kind of like that, and we need to avoid that. The other thing, I guess, on that point is the investment isn't necessarily just in at-risk industries. It's also in industries that can help us get out of this mess, right? That can help us point the way to the future. And I know there's a lot of tourism here, right? I look at agriculture and manufacturing. Those are businesses that we need to invest in because they're at risk, right? But also can grow. I look at industries like tourism, and that's a huge growth opportunity right now, right? And so this week we had a meeting about a month ago with the Ontario tourism minister. This week with the deputy minister, we've tabled a lot of recommendations about investment in tourism because, again, we think that's an opportunity that we can take as a province. So that's the first thing. Second, we've got to renegotiate this trade agreement. Even if we don't hold out a lot of hope that the U.S. is going to be, our partner for the long term the way it has been, we need some sort of stability. Because as long as you and I are alive, the U.S. is going to be our largest market, unless something very surprising happens, right? So we need to salvage what we can. We need to achieve some measure or some level of stability. Third, we need to diversify our exports. And that's one reason that, we've launched a webinar series we call Trade Talks. We had the first one last week. And it's providing advice to Ontario businesses, free for any of you to join. It's providing advice to Ontario businesses as to what they should be thinking about right now. And one part of the series is around export diversification. So last week we had a session, for instance, with Export Development Canada, with BDC, with the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service. And again, it's just trying to give people guidance as they think about, okay, I want to diversify my suppliers, or I want to diversify my markets. And I guess the final area is strengthening our competitiveness, right? And there are a number of elements to this. Interprovincial trade barriers is something we as a business community have been talking about for a very long time. But now we're finally seeing action, right? And we think that's kind of exciting. Now, I realize it's kind of a nerdy thing to say, because for the ordinary person, interprovincial trade barriers, it's not something that most people can relate to. But if you think about it and put it in terms that anybody can understand, right now there are very high barriers, regulatory barriers, between provinces, right? We bring down these barriers. It means lower prices and more choices for consumers. For businesses, it means access to the entire Canadian market without having to adapt your products or services. So, there's a win for business. For workers, for talent, for professionals, it means being able to go where the jobs are, which is also good for business, obviously, because you can attract them, where they're needed, particularly in sectors where there are shortages. And for government, it means tax revenue, which can be redeployed to support business or to support workers and communities as, in line with public needs. Obviously, we have to look at taxes and regulation. That's the number one priority of businesses that we surveyed in the Ontario Economic Report. It always is, cost of doing business. But here's what's interesting. You say to business what's important. Number one answer is tax and regulation, cost of doing business. But then if you look at the next few priorities, it's all about our workers, it's all about our communities, right? Affordable housing is the number 2 priority. Number 3 priority, healthcare. I want my people, I'm not going to attract people to my community and keep them there if there's not good health care. And the next one is talent, securing the talent pipeline, right? And so that's why we've been so adamant that Ontario needs to have the best funded post-secondary education system in Canada, not the worst. And we need really to take that very seriously. But there's a positive side to this too. Because imagine if it could really be a competitive advantage, that we could be buyers in the global talent market, and that we could attract the best and brightest researchers in the world to come to Ontario. Imagine that, at a time when they don't really want to go to the US because they don't feel welcome there. And imagine that's at the high level, but imagine at the local level if the people, young talent, could actually stay at home because there are enough programs, there are enough placements in the programs, there's enough funding for enrollment to colleges and universities that they actually can stay in or close to their communities and go to school, right? Keeping our young talent here. So the stakes are really high, but let me tell you why I am fundamentally optimistic. I've never seen more unity among Canadians. I've never seen more engagement in our business community and our chambers. A lot of chambers are growing right now because businesses understand the need to support one another and to stand together. I've never seen more urgency from our political leaders. And I've never seen a greater determination to turn talk into action. Let me give you a very simple little story to illustrate this. We launched this thing called the Ontario Business and Trade Leadership Coalition in January. As the Trump tariffs started to be announced, we said, okay, let's bring together the leaders of all of Ontario's largest industries that are affected by the tariff threat, right? So we have, agriculture and mining and forestry and manufacturing and, and it goes on and on and on. And so we formed this coalition, we announced it, and it was the 3rd day of the Ontario election campaign. It was a Sunday. I sent a text to Premier Ford and say, hey, here's the announcement. We launched this coalition. We'd love for you to meet with us. He calls me back in 15 minutes. And you know when the meeting was? The next day. The next day. Now, in 2024, we would have got that meeting, but it would have taken a month, maybe 2 months to get the meeting, right? Now, let me tell you, he didn't call me back and agree to that meeting because of me. He did it because of you. If we didn't have chambers across the province that represent businesses, big business, small business, medium-sized business, all business in every sector, in every community, we would not have the influence and the access that we have to decision makers that can help us have a better shot at ensuring that government policy actually reflects the interests, the needs, the aspirations of businesses in general and small businesses in particular. So that's why I'll close just by saying there's never been a more critical or valuable time for you to be members of the Huron Chamber of Commerce. Because number one, businesses need to support one another at this time, whether it's through analysis or advice or advocacy. We really need to support one another and learn from one another. Second, as I just illustrated, I hope, when we stand together, we are a movement that's incredibly wise for governments to heed and incredibly foolish for governments to ignore. We're stronger when we stand together. And finally, it's about leadership. It's not just about understanding what business needs today. It's about anticipating what businesses and workers and communities need tomorrow. It's easy to look around the world and feel anxiety, but the beautiful thing is you can feel two things at once. You can also feel optimism, and I really do. These times are going to test us. They'll test our resolve and our relationships. They'll test our courage and our conviction. But I really believe the great news is that businesses here and businesses across Ontario, we've got the resources, we have the talent, and we have the determination to lead. When everything is uncertain, anything is possible. And so together, I believe we can make prosperity possible. Thank you so much for listening to me today, and I look forward to the conversation.
Everybody just have a seat there. Thanks so much, Dan. For those of you who in the room who are not members of the Huron Chamber of Commerce, I will be standing at the door when we finish up here. No, I'm kidding. Although we do welcome any folks in the room who aren't members. We'd love to have you as part of our network, so that you can share your insights with us. And as Dan alluded to, we can do more together than separately. So, with that, I'll invite our panel to come up, and we'll start that discussion. And I'll let them introduce themselves, but I know their names at least. So we have Frank Herkmans from the Goderich Port Management Corporation. We have Mark Horst from Marcrest Manufacturing, and Jim Lin from Jim Lin. And yeah, have a seat, gentlemen. And I'm going to turn myself around a little bit here. So if you each want to grab your microphones behind you, and we'll just sit and chat a bit with the room. So maybe, so I'll let each of you just kind of introduce yourselves and perhaps share some thoughts, either from your sectors, from your experience, or responding to anything that Dan has shared with us. And I'll start with Frank, who's closest to me here.
Absolutely.
And tell us a little bit about yourself in case anyone doesn't know you, and share your thoughts.
Perfect. Everybody hear me okay from up here? So, Dan's done a fantastic job in summarizing what I think is a great forward for how this discussion is going to go today. When Colin asked, hey, look at your farm kid out of Forest that looks after the Port of Goderich, put some thoughts together on how it is that the activities that take place at the Port of Goderich can impact the commerce of not only the local community, Huron County, the province, but again, the country. So I think the best way to start this off, or kick this off with a quick intro, is that, so I am the president of the Port of Goderich. I've got 25 years experience throughout the Great Lakes, on both sides of the border. Prior to coming to the Port of Goderich, I looked after 18 different ports and dock facilities on both sides of the border, from a vessel perspective, from a cargo perspective, from a brokering perspective, so all aspects. So it really is unique right now for me to hear some of the changes that are taking place in regards to just general relationships between what I consider my peers in the US and my peers in Canada. We talk just like I've talked with individuals in this room here this morning, and through general media, if you will, and what's being portrayed on both sides of the border, the difference on perception of why some of the tariffs are being applied, the methodology behind the tariffs. There's people on the other side of the border that believe, hey, look, you guys have been stealing from us forever, and it's time for us to get this money back. And I don't really engage too deeply because I do need to get back to this side of the border when I'm over there. But I will say that that perception really needs to be cleared on a local level to be promoted upward, as opposed to just accepting the information that's coming from a higher level, believing that and pushing that out. So I'm looking forward to the discussion here today, because I do believe that the Port of Goderich, what we're really trying to attempt there is to expand its exposure. When we think about expanding the exposure of the Port of Goderich, we think about it, again, like I said earlier, from a local, county, provincial, federal, global perspective. And I do believe there's opportunities there that I'd like to share a little bit later on when we go through our panel discussion on how that could take place. But really, really happy to have the opportunity to share some of what is that I know about the port here with you folks today.
Thanks, Frank. Jim?
Jim Lynn. So was previously the CEO of the local credit union. I retired 10 years ago. Retirement didn't necessarily stick that well with me. So do a bit of consulting actually with John Marshall at the back. We primarily work with businesses in transition, either into sale or next generation, also heavily involved in the community. One of the things we did was set up the Huron Entrepreneur Fund in terms of helping provide additional capital for small businesses. We'd be happy to talk about that more with you as well. So my background is in agriculture, business, and then obviously through the finance side of things. So I keep pretty close tabs on that. Great presentation this morning, really appreciated that. Somewhat optimistic. One of the phrases I use a lot is hope is not a strategy, right? Without vision and action. And I think that is really the message we got this morning, which was we really have to be intentional about that. I think there's certainly some negatives in terms of what we're seeing. I guess one positive could be that we are going to see probably an extended period of lower interest rates. It would appear to stimulate the economy. But we're also in a period of significant inflation, so really stagflation, I think, is going to be an issue as we go forward. That's going to be a challenge. You're seeing a bit of tightening on the credit side with some of the lenders, and I think that that's going to be interesting to watch. One of the FIs announced recently they're going to be tightening down requirements in their retail mortgage business, and I think we need to be monitoring that. One piece of advice I would offer is it's really important that you stay in touch with your lenders early, to make sure that they understand your needs, and also to ask the question is what is their corporate stance at a national and local level as to how they see adjusting to that. And I think that's important that you maintain those relationships even better than in the past. So I think the institutions in general will be pretty keen to work with you, but lenders do not like surprises. And I speak from experience in that, right? So you're always better to be upfront with that. So kind of with that, we're optimistic. I think there's some opportunities in terms of new trade relationships. We dodged a bit of a bullet relative to the most recent announcement, but that's a pretty short window of comfort, I think, until we actually understand. We're into 4 years of uncertainty. Markets do not like uncertainty, as we all know, and that's going to be a real challenge. But I guess the more optimistic side is not unlike the port. There's a lot of businesses in Huron County that have great experience, a number who are working internationally outside of the U.S. market, and we need to leverage those relationships, I think, going forward. So I think that's my comments for right now.
Thanks, Jim. Mark?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, I'm Mark Horst from Markrest Manufacturing, the Northeast.
I think you actually turned it off instead of on.
Is that better? Yeah, okay,
Perfect.
sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm Mark Horst from Markrest Manufacturing, the northeast corner of Huron County. It seems kind of strange. You're mostly unfamiliar faces to me, which is okay. But because of our location, Listowel is our hometown, and it has everything we need pretty much, so I hardly ever get over here, but it's, I do enjoy coming over here. We are still part of the west coast of Ontario, but we're right in the corner. The other side of the road on the north side and the east side is Perth County, so we couldn't go any further. Anyway, we've been in business for almost 20 years. What we make is a machine called a bale bearing. It packages small square bales into a bundle, and it's been a unique journey for us. I also farm. I had manufacturing experience previous, just working for a local manufacturer, and in 1998 I quit working. I was going to farm full time, but it didn't stay that way. I got into the hay export business to keep me busy, partnership with one of my uncles in Pennsylvania, and growing small square bales of hay for export. It's hard work. My children were still just in grade school, and I thought there has to be an easier way of handling small square bales. So with my experience and some God-given talent, I'm not an engineer, but I ended up starting to develop this machine called a bale bearing, and for myself, but it didn't take long till I realized that, you know what, this is something that other people need too. When we were making the first prototype, somebody came into the shop and wondered, what is this thing we're making? And when he found out what it is, he said, well, if it works, it'll be the savior of the small square bale. So I like telling that story. 2007 was the first year of production. We made 9 machines, sold them locally. By 2009, we were selling worldwide. I had made a website, and it's kind of at the start of that period, you know, and very cheap advertising. People were flying in from Australia, Belgium, Holland, England to see the machine. They liked it. They bought it. And at the start, you know, it was paid before it left Ontario. 2008 already, I was selling to the United States. So it grew, and it was right at the time of the recession. For me, I didn't feel it. Looking back, I realized that it helped temper our growth, which was good.
Right.
And because it's hard to keep up with when you start a new business, a new product, and try to keep up with the growth. It's not easy. And we did it without outside investment, just us and the bank, which we're thankful for. I didn't want somebody else telling me what I have to do.
Maybe I'll stick with you, because I assume that, well, I know that you use a lot of steel in the bale bearing, and of course one of the tariffs that is in effect now is around steel in both directions, I think. And so I'm curious if you've seen an impact in your business so far, and then for your U.S. customers, your U.S. market, if you're seeing any changes in the last few months with the situation in the U.S.
Yeah, most of our product is exempt based on the tariff code, but the bale handling is not, so we have to charge the steel tariff on it, and it's low enough that hasn't affected it yet at this point.
Okay. Good.
But I will say that, I'm not good at remembering names, but you had a great presentation, and I support everything you say. The only thing I would like to say is challenges are our opportunities. So let's turn this into an opportunity, and we'll have more to say yet.
Yeah. I've never quoted Winston Churchill more than I have in the last few weeks, and the relevant quote is, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think many of our manufacturers and exporters and every business in some way is looking for ways to find that silver lining, to find those opportunities that are being exposed through this crisis, through this time. So one of the things that I wanted to pull out of the report was the labor market issue, and one of the reasons is that Huron County, and as part of the 4 counties, has until very recently had the lowest unemployment in the province for over 2 years, basically, in the 3s and 4%, which is basically full employment. And so it's been very, very tough. As anyone here who has been looking for labor, it's been tough to find labor. And so that's recently changed, and we'll see how that shakes out in the next few months. But I'm curious, I don't know if Jim, maybe with your clients, how they're managing the kind of unique labor market in Huron County.
We certainly, both through clients, but also because I'm involved with some other economic development activities, previously it was a real issue of both attracting and retaining. What special arrangements you have to make in terms of housing and transportation. And there's been some really good innovative stuff going on. Not hearing as much of that right now, I think, but there's always a demand for high quality, skilled, especially management labor, I think, or management leadership. So not hearing as much about it, but for those businesses who are actively looking to grow and expand, sourcing that talent is an ongoing issue and needs to be specifically addressed both by government and by other agencies going forward.
Yeah, feel free to jump in, any of you, if you have thoughts on these things.
I'll just
go ahead.
Jump in.
Yeah,
You made the offer, so I'll jump in.
Absolutely.
In hand with Georgian College in Owen Sound has a marine campus in regards to entice and teach folks about the marine industry in general, and with the Port of Goderich having, plus or minus 225 vessels coming in and out of that facility on an annual basis. We've got 9 docks down there that require all kinds of shoreside support, all kinds of onboard support. So we, the mayor specifically, in hand with Dave Shorey from Georgian College, is working closely to try and understand how the Port of Goderich can support some of that practical, hands-on stuff as opposed to the theoretical that they learn in the classroom at the Port of Goderich, because quite often we'll have vessels sitting there that are either getting repairs done to them over a period of time, which is a perfect avenue to get some kids interested and get into engine rooms, get into wheelhouses, understand how vessels need to be tied up. So they're, I'll relate that back to the trades challenge that we have in general terms to find employment. But certainly our participation with the town, the port, and Georgian College, we're aggressively pursuing expanding the opportunity for kids to come down and get some exposure at the port.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too, just to give a bit of a macro level perspective. I mean, I think it's so important right now that there be really close collaboration between colleges and universities and local business, right? And chambers of commerce, I find, are a really effective intermediary, right? So the more we can get into that, right, the better, right? And I know that's a priority for municipal economic development agencies, but there's I was involved in a panel at George Brown College in Toronto on Monday where we just talked about some of this, and the experience we're hearing a lot from educators is that there's a bit of a wilderness gap, from when people graduate to, succeeding in their first job. I won't necessarily say getting the first job. They may get the job, but they don't necessarily arrive with the skills and capabilities they need, right? And so the more employers can be involved, chambers can be involved, with universities and colleges, and incorporate work integrated learning into curricula, right, the more we'll have those grads that are ready, right? And the other piece of it, of course, is marketing opportunities. That's really important for regional economic development. Marketing, the mining sector, the construction sector, there are a lot of sectors that have huge shortages right now. And, so having young people understand the opportunities available, like Frank was saying, I think is really valuable.
Great. I can't let a conversation about post-secondary education go by without acknowledging Heather McKenzie Card from Fanshawe College, who has been a strong partner of the Chamber, has a strong presence here in Huron County, and has been a great partner for us for many years. So I think with that, I'll turn this way and see if anyone in the room has questions or insights or anything they want to share or ask of the panel. I know we're just past 9 o'clock, but I blocked my whole morning, so I mean, I'm happy to stick around, but I understand not everyone has that same flexibility. If anyone in the room has anything for the panel or for Dan or just wants to share something. Heather.
So now that we're talking about post-secondary, we all know we're in a crisis in the college sector, and I know the Ontario Chamber of Commerce has now supported Colleges Ontario, which is our advocacy across the province to support kind of community colleges across the province. I'm just wondering if you can give a little more insight into how colleges actually support the economic development in local communities. As some may or may not know, we have a location at Tisch Center in Clinton. So we offer some PSW and ECE, but I think right now the colleges in general are looking for opportunities to do better and work more collaboratively with businesses to support the needs of communities. So I think just some insight around that, because I know you've been having some conversations with Colleges Ontario, and I would be certainly interested to see kind of how that looks across the province.
So I'm just for the room, Heather was asking about the connection between post-secondary education and economic development, really, and how that role plays, and with Colleges Ontario and Dan's perspective on that.
Yeah, no, well, thank you. We've certainly been working hard on this file, and what we did a couple of weeks ago was we sent a letter to, as soon as the new Minister of Post-Secondary Education and the new Minister of Finance were sworn in, and the good news is they were the old ministers who became the new ministers after the election, so continuity is not bad because you don't have to re-educate. But, I co-signed a letter with the President of Colleges Ontario and the President of the Council of Ontario Universities, co-signed by 63 local chambers of commerce, right? Which made it a very powerful letter, just calling for the government to make investment in post-secondary education a priority in the upcoming budget. And we think that's really critical, and the argument we're making is, look, yeah, there have been, years of historical underfunding, of the sector, made worse by the fact that we've had now a tuition freeze since 2019, right? So they cut tuition 10% in 2019. They've frozen it for 6 years. Think about what inflation has been in that period, right? And you don't have to, have a PhD in math to know that, sustainability of the sector is really threatened as a result. The government understands this. And so, but we're saying, never mind all that. You didn't create the problem. It's decades in the making, but you have the opportunity to fix it. And the argument we've made, which I mentioned earlier in my talk, was let's actually make Ontario a buyer in the global market, and let's keep young people at home. And if you look at colleges in particular, colleges have been incredibly responsive to labor market needs and demands, right? They're the ones on the front lines, building partnerships with employers, understanding and then adjusting their programs so that they're responsive to demand. And I think that's really important. I can very often, it's interesting, having been out of 46 different chambers, like pretty quickly I can size up the success of a chamber based on whether there's a municipal representative in the room and a college representative in the room, right? And when there is, you kind of go, okay, there's some good partnership happening here, right? So I think it's super critical. I think there are real opportunities there, but we have to be prepared to invest in them, and we have to be prepared to hold government's feet to the fire.
Great. Any other? Janice.
I just wanted to provide an update. Frank had made a very good point about partnerships with the Marine program at Georgian College in the town of Goderich, and I just wanted to make everybody aware that we actually have UBCI students that are taking a bus up to the Marine program this coming Monday. And to Daniel's point about partnerships, we actually have an import stakeholder that has paid for the busing for the students to go up to the Marine program. So we're looking forward to that, and to create some energy with those kids that maybe don't know what their life path might be at that point, and for them to know that there is a very robust marine sector job available for them. So to that point, I just wanted to update you.
Great. So Janice Hallahan, CAO of Town of Goderich, is sharing that through a partnership with Georgian College, there'll be a busload of of students from the high school in Goderich going up to Owen Sound, and that cost covered by one of the stakeholders at the port, and so it's a collaborative effort to expose those students to the marine industry. So maybe since we're talking about marine, I'll go back to you, Frank. We talked about silver linings and opportunities in a crisis, and so how would you frame the port as an opportunity, as a silver lining in the either domestic supply chains or global supply chains?
Yeah. So I think you could almost split that up into 3 buckets, where 2 of them may be silver linings and the third maybe not so much.
I'll take 2 out of 3, but
yeah. So one of the challenges, obviously, that we're seeing from an industry perspective is that the water levels are down in the lake right now in general. And so we're actually about to start some emergency dredging in the inner harbor at the Port of Goderich this coming week, because some of the vessels that are coming in do not have the ability to load down to what they call full seaway height, depth, which is 26 feet 6 inches. So you can imagine that the vessel that leaves there, if it's going to Ireland or Norway or somewhere like that, it's going to make its full capacity money. So if it leaves with 1,000 or 2,000 tons light, that's a problem, because now the cargo that's on that vessel is paying a higher float rate and they're not getting the materials. So at the end of the day, the boat makes its money regardless of how many tons is on it. And the goal is to fill that vessel to 100% capacity every time that it leaves. The next thing that we're faced with is that in regards to the industry itself, in hand with CUSMA and the tariffs and everything else that are taking place, the American government wants to rebuild U.S. shipbuilding industry. And there is a policy floating around D.C. right now, which through the USTR, which is the U.S. Trade Representatives, that any vessels that are built essentially in China that are coming into a U.S. port will have at a minimum $1 million fee applied to it when it makes a port of call. So when you think about, I don't want to get down into the weeds at all, but when you think about it holistically and the impact that it can make, is if you have major ports that have a vessel coming in from China with 20,000 containers on it as an example, and it's worth $500 million worth of cargo, that $1 million to land in Baltimore or New York or somewhere like that has a much less impact than a stone boat coming out of Manitoulin Island that's going to Detroit to unload. It essentially, we are a unintended capture, the Great Lakes Shipping is, in this mandate, and we've been pushing. I'm also Secretary Treasurer on Ontario Marine Council. We are trying to get the Great Lakes portion of this pulled out, because it will essentially decimate the Great Lakes shipping, because the majority of vessels that are moving around the Great Lakes right now are Chinese-built vessels that have been out there for 30 or 40 years. And when you think about the competitive structure of why is it that U.S. can't make vessels competitively in the States compared to China, when you think about China, and I've been there, they have cities established for shipbuilding. When you build a vessel in the U.S., they basically bring in all the infrastructure in order to be able to support shipbuilding. So the last vessel that was built in the U.S. Essentially got up to about $250 million, where today you could order a boat out of China, the same vessel, for about $40 million. So to scale, so that is one of the not so silver lining pieces that are in there. From a silver lining piece, if you take a look at the people that are currently doing trade, let's use grain as an example, and they might be depending on supply coming out of the U.S., I do believe with the markets that we can access, even out of little old Goderich, is going to create opportunity through Parrish and Heimbecker and different operators there to move that cargo and increase demand out of Ontario, because they will be interested potentially in dealing with Canada now on some of these trades, as opposed to paying the U.S. with the tariff impact of coming in. So that is a silver lining. I also believe that the final silver lining that I'll talk about is that the Port of Goderich as a whole, I believe has lots of growth opportunity in regards to exposure, new commodities being moved out of there. Traditionally, we focused on salt, we focused on grain. As of late, we focused on aggregates. We've got calcium chloride that comes into the local market out of the west side of Michigan. But now what we're looking at is space utilization there to be able to entertain the opportunity for containers, project cargo, milk run container business, so that, you know, essentially a large vessel comes into Montreal, they put that onto a vessel that can get through the seaway and the locks, and they drop 10 or 15 containers off here, they drop 15 or 20 containers off there, and then they collect the empty ones coming back. So we are all about space utilization, which I do believe will be a silver lining. So to really stretch that out into about 6 or 7 minutes, that answer, that's where we're at. And I'm totally willing, you know, after the discussion is done here today, not everybody's comfortable in presenting them in a group setting, but if you have a thought or an opportunity, and regardless of how wild you think it is, please come and see me about the opportunity out of the Port of Goderich, because yeah, I'm excited about it, the town's excited about it, our board's excited about it, and we're there to grow, for sure.
Thanks, Frank. Chamber's excited about it too. So, so you mentioned the grain business at the port, and that's kind of a good segue for me to pivot to agriculture. So I'm gonna look back at Mark. You know, you can't talk about Huron County economy without talking about agriculture. It is the engine that drives this county and these communities. So I'm just curious, Mark, we've talked about you as a manufacturer, but if you could put your farmer hat on for me and talk a little bit about what you've seen or what you're hearing in terms of the impact of the last few months, but also just kind of the outlook for agriculture, and whether that's commodities or whatever else. Any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to know exactly what to say, so I talk more out of experience and what I hear. So I'll just give some of my experiences. And a couple of years ago, the Liberal government said we have to reduce our fertilizer use. And with my traveling, I met up with somebody in a company in the States that sells a fertilizer that will allow less use of this fertilizers. Like it's to explain what it is, it's a calcium-based product that just helps release the nutrients that we already have in the soil. And the soil tests that we do is based on usable nutrients, not what's actually there. So if you do an analysis to check what's actually there, there's way more than we need, so we're putting too much fertilizer on. So I actually I talked to my broker, can I import this fertilizer? No, because it wasn't certified for use in Canada. And anyway, he said you have to talk to CFIA. So, well, how do you get hold of CFIA? I went on their website, I sent an email, and I explained my case, tried to get just for your own use permit or whatever to try it. Radio silence.
Yeah.
And that's not right. We need to harmonize. If it's legal in the U.S., it should be legal in Canada. I understand that you should still have a good hard look at it, because maybe there are some things. BSC is another thing. Not BSC. What they use in give to the cattle to make more milk.
Right.
BST, sorry. And BST cannot be tested in the milk. But if we allow the import of U.S. milk, why don't we allow our dairy farmers to use it too? Those are the kind of things that we have to harmonize between Canada and the United States, and between our provinces. My son-in-law owns a slaughterhouse. He's provincially inspected. he's in the middle of southwestern Ontario, so he doesn't have to sell into Quebec or Manitoba, and he's not going to. But if he was located on the border, why is it safe to eat his meat in Ontario, but not in Manitoba?
Yeah.
Like, those are crazy things. We have to take care of that.
Those are some of the interprovincial trade barriers that Dan was talking about.
And we're talking about it, but let's not talk about it. Let's do something about it.
For sure.
This is our opportunity. Knock down these provincial barriers. Knock down these barriers between Canada and the United States. Let's harmonize our things. And
Yeah. Dan, you had a quick thought, and then I got to go to Jim because he has
Yeah,
thoughts
no,
too.
just completely agree. And you know, we brought together in early March, we brought together the CEOs of all the provincial chambers in Canada. We brought them to Toronto. We all, you know, sat down with Premier Ford and Nova Scotia Premier Houston, and we said, you know, we need you to make this a priority. They committed to us. Nova Scotia already did it, but Ontario committed that one of the first things they'll do when the legislature resumes is table legislation that would enable mutual recognition with other provinces. So where the other province recognizes our standards, we'll recognize theirs, right? And I totally agree with you. There's no reason why a product or a professional credential that's acceptable in Alberta or British Columbia or Quebec shouldn't be accepted in Ontario, right? You know, their standards, and vice versa, right? And that's good for everyone.
Yeah.
it's also the labor laws. Like, we can't work in Quebec.
Yeah. Jim, you had thoughts on ag?
Well, my background's in ag, so and through the lending side of things as well, a lot of experience. But I think the technology that's developing inside the agricultural sector is just amazing at this point in time. And we have a local industry, for example, Huron Commodities, Martin Vanderlyn. If you look at the project that he's got underway relative to soy isolates, that's an unbelievable example of what can happen with local innovation and leadership. And that's only one example of several that I'm aware of. If you're not aware of Martin's project, I really encourage you to look up the website and talk to Martin, because it's an unbelievable project. Unfortunately, the plant won't be in here, but you know, the sourcing of those soybeans and whatnot in that market. But I just think that's the positive side, right? It's going to prompt, with the right support, the ag sector, I think, in the value added and export markets that we really have to leverage going forward.
Yeah. Huron Commodities, another valued member of the Huron Chamber of Commerce. Any other questions or comments from, we're at 20 after 9, and so I recognize that folks may have to be moving on with their Fridays, but at the back there, yeah?
So I'm not sure how to present this, but is there an organization, or could be an organization, where you get a potential buyer can find a potential supplier? For example, you get all these Canadians who want to buy Canadian. A lot of those guys are currently buying the US, but if those guys in Canada don't know where to find a supplier, a manufacturer in Canada, is there a way we can kind of align those with memberships to certain things or certain websites where when somebody's looking to procure something, they would find a list of potential suppliers for that? We're a small manufacturer, we do sell a lot in the US, and because of current tariffs and what we fall into, we're currently fine.
Yeah.
But if you get the Canadian who wants to buy Canadian, and he's always bought from the US, how can we align those two?
So the question is there an organization or some way for Canadian businesses to source Canadian product, or to find sources of Canadian product, and then presumably on the other side as well is just finding customers to sell to internally. So you know, we have Export Development Canada, which is great for helping businesses find export markets, but to my knowledge, there isn't really one central place to find those domestic development, you know, domestic supply chains, and so I don't know if Dan, you have any insight there.
I got to say, I have to. When I get back to the office, I'm going to improve our cybersecurity, because I think you've been reading my emails. You know, we have actually tabled a proposal to the government to actually work with chambers of commerce to try to build exactly that kind of product. Now, it's not something we can do on our own because it requires a huge upfront cost, but that's exactly what we aspire to do. Right now, we've set aside some money to do this, but we need partners and we need support, right? But we think that that could potentially be quite powerful in helping businesses find opportunities by finding one another, right? And then you could also imagine like a big company that wants to provide services to small businesses, support small businesses, how they would find this useful as well, and they might pay for access to this, which could create a revenue stream for chambers of commerce or for other partners. So there's lots of potential here to help businesses just find each other and do business with one another, but we got to get there, and that's not something we can do overnight, but we hope to be part of the solution.
Yeah, well, now I think Dan's been reading my emails because I've had similar conversations with other chambers of commerce across the province, and we have our online directories of our members, and every chamber has that, and so we have Stratford right next door with their Aaron's in the room with their business directory, and but there's no way to link those two things together. So a business in Huron County that might need a packager, whatever, there might be that business in Stratford, but unless you know where to go, unless you know how to find it, the information that Aaron has, there's no way to share that with us. And so I'm glad to hear that that's happening at the provincial level as well. So I am going to wrap things up because we are over time and I know people have to go. So what I'd like to do is invite Nelson Santos to come up and bring some greetings. Oh, is there one last question? All right, we'll squeeze one more in before Nelson comes up.
Just one quick final comment. Huron County has employment services. My name is Matt Deshane. I'm an employment consultant with Agilic Employment Services. My big boss is Employment Ontario, the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Skills, Training and Development. We recently just took over for the Center for Employment and Learning in February, but we have a presence in the community. Our main office is in Goderich. We're in Exeter. We're in Wingham. We're in Clinton. And if there's a labor issue, we can connect hidden job seekers to employers. We also have excellent funding with Better Jobs Ontario. So Frank, for example, was mentioning that he's looking for shoreside dock workers. We're hoping to be able to use Better Jobs Ontario funding to get candidates the right training to enter those spaces. So again, it's Agilic, A-G-I-L-E-C. That's my shameless 30 seconds self-promotion. But it was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Matt, and we should talk. So I'm going to invite Nelson to come up and close us off with some greetings from the municipality of North Huron on behalf of Reeve Heffer.
Thank you, Colin, and certainly welcome, and I bid you a great welcome and safe travels back to where you're going back to work today. But on behalf of the Township of New Huron, this is a proud community of Blythe, as we're certainly happy to be part of the growing community and part of the tourism industry that we see as a great opportunity for our local businesses, as well as noted for that. So I want to thank the Chamber for the invitation today to be part of this discussion. We know there's a lot of uncertainty, but there's a lot of pride and passion within our communities across the county that we believe will show up and fight and work towards greater success stories. So hearing the challenges that are here before us, the opportunities are even greater. So I think that's one of the messages we'll take away. So great to see so many new faces. For a person who's been here 3 weeks, I also see some new familiar faces already. So I'm looking forward to continuing that connection with our communities and in our county. So welcome and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nelson. So just just one final thank you to our panelists and to Dan for making the trip, and to all of you for coming out this morning and participating in this. And I think, as Jody alluded to in her remarks, we hope to make this an annual event tied to the annual economic report and bring that local focus to the provincial data. And I will mention that if you found any value in this at all today, when I send you an email in the fall asking you to fill out the Ontario Economic Survey, please do so, because that's the only way that Huron County data can be found in that provincial report. And if we don't participate, we get left out. And so it's important for our information to be in that. And so you will get an email from me in October, something like that, November. And if you could fill out that survey when it comes, that'd be great. So thanks again to everyone for coming, and feel free to stick around and do the networking thing. That's what we're famous for at the Chamber. So with that, I will say thank you again.